Hello, everyone. My name is Peter Evans. I'm the managing partner of Evans Disability. And today what I'd like to do is to do a mock hearing for you, where I will be playing the role of a client in a Social Security disability hearing. Mr. Cahill will be playing the role of the attorney, and Dan Hyatt, who's a former Social Security Administrative Law Judge, who is gracious enough to do hearings for our firm, will be playing the role of a Social Security Administrative Law Judge. By phone, who's not present, is an attorney in our firm, Isabella Baez. She'll be playing the role of a vocational expert. Generally speaking, this is how the presentation will be when you show up on a video hearing. A phone hearing obviously is done over the phone, and an in-person is obviously in a hearing room in one of the OHOs across the country. And when I say OHO, I mean Office of Hearing Operations. So that being said, I'd like to go ahead and get started. And at the end of this hearing, or towards the end of the video, please continue to watch. We're going to do a little question and answer and some tips. I'll give you some tips from both Dan, who's done thousands and thousands of hearings over his career as both a Social Security Administrative Law Judge and also as a claimant's attorney, and then Mr. Cahill, who's also done thousands and thousands of hearings over the last couple decades, working for one of the largest Social Security disability law firms in the country, and now has graced us enough by working with Evans Disability. So that being said, let's go ahead and start this, what we're going to call a mock hearing.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Dan Hyatt. Today is March 31st. We're hearing the case of Peter Evans, who has applied for benefits under the Social Security Act. Mr. Evans is represented by attorney Jack Cahill today, and later we'll be hearing from a vocational expert, Isabella Baez, regarding jobs and testimony regarding the requirements of various types of work. Mr. Evans, you are not recording this proceeding, are you?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, it's very important. There's one recorder, and that's John Smith, and he's recording this. There can only be one recording, and so, of course, Mr. Cahill, you're not recording either, are you?
Not recording, sir.
Okay, and Mr. Evans, are you alone in a room?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, if anybody comes into the room, please let me know so that we can pause this hearing, since your testimony has to be yours and yours alone, and you cannot receive any assistance from anybody else. Because of COVID, we are not having an in-person hearing. We're having a telephone hearing. And this is a way to allow people who've applied for disability to have a hearing without having to wait until after the COVID situation gets resolved. So, Mr. Evans, are you aware that you could wait and have an in-person hearing, but in fact, you choose to have a telephone hearing today?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And Mr. Cahill, have you discussed the issues with your client that we're going to address today?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Evans and I have been over the 5-step test, our burden of proof, the format of the hearing, the role of the expert, all the other issues in the notice, and we'll waive the reading if it pleases the court.
Thank you, Mr. Cahill. I appreciate that. Okay. All right. So at this point, before I swear Mr. Evans and our vocational expert, I want to know if there are any objection to any of the exhibits in the file.
No, Your Honor. I've read the proposed exhibits. We have no objection to their admission.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Cahill. Do you believe that the record is complete at this point?
Yes, Your Honor. We filed all the evidence that we have. Mr. Evans will testify that he remains in treatment, and if during his testimony he identifies any exhibits, any evidence that the court requires, I'll be happy to get them. But we have nothing to offer. This file is complete and ready to judge the case.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes,
all right, then without objection, I'll receive all the exhibits in the exhibit file, including exhibits 1 through 5A, 1 through 7B, 1 through 4D, 1 through 13E, and 1 through 27F. And at this point, Mr. Evans, Ms. Baez, are you on the telephone?
Yes, Your Honor.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask both you and Mr. Evans to raise your right hand. And do you and each of you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do, Your Honor.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Cahill, would you like to have an opening statement, kind of tell me your theory of the case?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll be brief. We'll let the evidence speak for itself. This is a combined disability case, of course, and there are three well-developed and well-identified medically determinable impairments. The file shows, and I expect Mr. Evans to testify, that he suffers from degenerative disc disease, which affects all four of his extremities and leaves him severely impaired in terms of mobility and use of his hands and arms. He also suffers from fibromyalgia and diabetes, as the court is aware. Those are two conditions which affect the claimant's whole person. Unfortunately, his diabetes, which is a long-standing problem for him, has progressed to the point where he has peripheral neuropathy. It affects his mobility. It affects his use of his hands. Diabetes and fibromyalgia, of course, will also cause him pain, mental dysfunction, weakness, and a sort of a feeling of illness that most diabetics describe that would interfere with his productivity when he's at work and his ability to get to work in the first place. I expect the claimant to testify that he had problems keeping up at work, missing a good deal of work in the last few months before the onset date that's alleged in the application. There's a pattern here where he transitioned to gradually less demanding occupations because of all these impairments, and until the point where he couldn't work anymore. That's the onset date that's alleged in the application. As you'll see from the records, the D exhibits indicate he has a very respectable work history, Your Honor. And if he could work, he'd be at work now instead of in your court. That's our opening statement. That is to say, combined disability, a number of impairments, and we're ready to give evidence, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Cahill. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Evans, I'm going to ask you a number of questions and just do your best to answer. If you don't recall, you need to tell me that you don't recall, or if you don't understand my question, let me know and I can restate it. So hopefully you'll understand it. Okay.
Thank you.
And after I get through with questioning you, Mr. Cahill will have an opportunity to ask you questions as well. Okay. Let's start with your family. Are you married, single?
I'm married, Your Honor.
Okay. Any children?
Yes, Your Honor.
How old?
7 and 3.
Okay. And does your wife work?
Yes, Your Honor.
What does she do?
She's a podcaster.
Okay. So is she at home?
Yes, Your Honor. She does that job from home.
Okay. And so your 7-year-old, is your 7-year-old in school?
Not since the start of the pandemic. My wife homeschools him as well. And so no, yes, he's in school as homeschool, but not in the traditional going to school.
Okay. And do you live in a house or an apartment, 1-story, 2-story?
Yes, Your Honor. We live in a house. It's 2 stories.
Okay. All right. And is your bedroom upstairs, downstairs?
No, Your Honor. I'm sorry, Your Honor. My bedroom all the bedrooms are on the main floor, and the second floor is just more of a loft, like a play area.
Okay. All right.
There's no bathrooms or bedrooms or kitchens or anything upstairs. It's just like a big, where the kids play.
Okay. I see here that you're alleging disability back to September 1, 2020. What happened? What makes that the beginning of your disability onset?
It's where, Your Honor, I was working full time, and I had to come down to part-time work, and the part-time work, really part-time levels, because of my severe pain, and I have degenerative disc disease, as Mr. Cahill said, that really affects my back. and that was affecting my ability to perform my job. And then the diabetes as well, with my hands and my feet going numb and burning sensation. And then my doctor diagnosed me with fibromyalgia, which is caused a lot of pain as well.
Let me stop you just for a minute. I'll be asking you about each of your medical problems at some point, but right now, I just want to focus on your job history and why you applied and so forth. So you, I would assume September 1, 2020 is the last day that you worked?
Full time.
Full time. And how many hours after that, how many hours a week did you work part-time and for how long?
So I was working 4 hours a week part-time, just so my employer could help me out. He really, really understanding employer. And I did that just for, I don't remember, Your Honor, maybe 3 or 4 months. I was dealing with a lot of health issues during that time, and my employer was really patient and kind and helped me out a lot, but it was really only like 4 hours a week. They were allowing me to stay on the health insurance program.
Well, I'm sure that was very helpful. This was a law office you worked in, is that correct?
Yeah, yes, Your Honor.
What did you do there?
I was a receptionist. I was answering the phones and trying to take messages, and then I would put files away. Just people come into the office, I would say hello, or really by phone too. So mostly just phone work.
Okay, all right. And then you started that job in looks like 2020, and before that, you were a cashier, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor. I was a cashier at a grocery store.
Okay. Did you have to bag groceries as well as ring them up?
Yes, Your Honor. I don't know if you're familiar with Fred Meyer in our area, but it's a major grocery store, and just the typical, helping people out coming through the line, and I would bag their groceries, run their credit cards, take their money.
What do you think the heaviest weight that you lifted in that job was?
Maybe a dog, or dog food, a big bag of dog food. I don't know how much that weighs, but that was rare, more rare. But a big bag of dog food would probably be the heaviest.
Probably 20 pounds, maybe 30.
Sure. Yeah, 20 to 30 pounds.
Okay. And then it looks like you worked there at Fred Meyer for about 5 years. Before that, what did you do?
I did construction on new homes. It was a great job. I loved it. You get to build some stuff, but I did some construction on new homes.
Okay. And were you a carpenter, a finished carpenter, framer? What sort of functions did you perform building new homes?
Mostly like framing, just sort of the nail and hammer guy. Do some framing. I did a lot of cleanup as well. My boss and I had a really great relationship. So if you ever need anything, I'd love to do it for him. But I did a lot of just mostly framing.
Okay. And it looks like you started that job in about 2007. Is that right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And why did you leave that job?
It was starting to get really heavy. I mean, it was starting to take a toll on my back. I was starting to have some back pain, not anywhere what it is today. But just the heavy lifting of the lumber from the truck into the house. I would come home every night and I would just be so stiff and sore. So I really wanted to find something that would be, I love working, and I really wanted to find something that'd be easier on my body. And so I saw a hire sign as a cashier at Fred Meyer. And so that's.
Okay. All right. And what do you think the heaviest weight was that you lifted doing that construction work?
Oh, Your Honor, I don't know, 100 pounds maybe with those. I mean, you would carry 2x4s on your shoulder. And
okay, all right, that's fair enough. All right, let's talk about your educational background. Looks like you got a GED, is that right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, any college?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, have you ever tried?
For college, Your Honor?
Yes.
No, Your Honor.
Okay. And what happened with high school that you dropped out and had to get a GED?
Just, I don't do very well with school. I struggled with, I can read, but it wasn't my, I'm
Thing.
better with just more physical stuff, but sorry, I'm over answering. My lawyer told me, I want to.
You're doing fine. You're doing just fine, Mr. Evans. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's talk about your medical problems. First, I'd like to hear about diabetes. When were you first diagnosed with diabetes? And it's type 2, I assume.
Yes, Your Honor. So I think I was first diagnosed. I don't remember the exact date. Is it okay if I just guess at the date?
Well, can you give me the year?
Yes, I'll try to guess. I think diabetes diagnosed was 2015, I think.
Okay.
But again,
And-
that's a bit of a guess. I don't want, I know I raised my hand and sort of tell you the truth. So I just want to let you know, I think it was either 2015 or 14 or possibly 16, but in that.
Right
time.
in that area. Okay. And it looks like you're on metformin, and it looks like you were prescribed metformin in September 2015. Does that sound about right as far as when you were diagnosed?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. That sounds exactly right. Right around
Okay.
2015. And then they put me on metformin and suggested I change my diet and my lifestyle habits.
Okay. And you're not on insulin, are you?
Not yet, Your Honor. I think that's where we're headed.
Okay. All right. So you have an interesting combination of impairments. You've got some, obviously some back problems. You've also got a diagnosis of fibromyalgia, and then you've got diabetes as well. So it looks from your records like you're having problems in your extremities, your legs, your arms, your hands, your feet. I'd like you to tell me, let's start with your feet first. What problems do you have with your feet?
So the doctor called it neuropathy.
Okay.
And it's a burning sensation in my feet.
Okay.
And it basically, when I stand on my feet, or when they're touching the ground, they'll really start to burn. And so what I like to do is, when I'm sitting, I'm sitting now, and I keep my feet kind of elevated or onto something else, so my whole foot is not touching the ground, or I'm very light in my slippers. I have slippers on right now.
And do you have sensation, full sensation in your feet?
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean full sensation. Like, do you mean
can you feel, for instance, if you put your foot on the brake or the gas pedal in your car, can you feel the sense of pressure required to make your car move or stop?
Yeah, I can feel I can feel the brake pedal, but it's a burning, it hurts to push on it. Does that make sense? It's
okay. All right. And do you drive?
Yes, Your Honor. Sometimes.
Okay. How often?
I'd say on average, probably 1 to 2 times a week.
Okay. Now let's talk about your hands. What sort of problems are you having with your hands?
Well, very similar sensations in my hands. They'll start to burn and tingle, and which will affect my ability to use my hands after. So I can use a pen, but I'll drop it, or so just holding items has become a little bit more difficult. Actually, a lot more difficult.
Okay. How about your arms?
I have shoulder pain. So yes, I have pain in my shoulders and my arms. And so, yes, I have difficulty using my arms.
Okay. And then your legs, are you able to walk?
I am able to walk, Your Honor. I have been using a cane around the house. And then every once in a while, if I have to go longer distances, I'll switch it up to a walker, because frankly, because it has that little seat on it, and I can kneel on it or sit on it when I need to. But yes, I can walk.
How far can you walk, do you think, without stopping?
With a cane or without a cane?
With a cane?
Without stopping, I'd say probably a couple blocks, 2 blocks.
Okay, all right. And then it looks like you've got a herniated disc at L5S1. Is that your lumbar degenerative disc disease that you're complaining about?
In my low back, it
Yeah.
hurts a lot. In my mid to low back, and then it kind of shoots down into radiates down into my legs.
Okay.
That's the back pain.
Has the doctor told you whether the problems with your legs are related to your lumbar problem or your diabetes or your fibromyalgia?
Right. So I don't, so, you know, depends on which doctor I talk to, Your Honor, to be frank. I mean, I'm seeing a couple different doctors, but they believe it's because of my back.
Okay, all right. Have you ever had surgery on your back?
No, Your Honor, not yet, but that sounds like what.
Is that what the doctors have discussed with you?
Yes, they're wanting to do surgery. I'm only 47, so they want to see, you know, how I think there's physical therapy records in the file, but I wanted to get through physical therapy to see if there's any improvement from that, and then do the surgery. I think that's kind of the plan. And they want to do, I think they're at 6, I don't know exactly, but maybe Mr. Cahill does it 6 months or 12 months of physical therapy.
Okay, and I see you used to be a smoker and they told you they wouldn't perform surgery unless you stopped smoking, and it looks like you did stop about, what, 8 months ago?
Yes, Your Honor.
Good, congratulations.
Thank you. It was really
Okay.
hard.
All right. Now, the fibromyalgia, who diagnosed that? Do you remember which doctor?
Yeah, I think it was Dr. Jones.
Okay. And what is his specialty? Is he a rheumatologist?
I don't know.
If you don't know, that's okay.
I'm sorry. I don't know.
Mr. Cahill, do you know Dr. Jones? Is he a rheumatologist or a general practitioner?
Dr. Jones is a rheumatologist, Your Honor. It looks like there's a referral from the claimant's PCP. I'll examine the witness on that further.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay, so with the fibromyalgia, Mr. Evans, what sort of symptoms do you have that you think are attributable to the fibromyalgia?
Your Honor, I didn't even know what fibromyalgia was before a couple of years back, a few years ago. So, but my PCP referred me to this doctor because he brought it up. And because I'm having pain what feels like everywhere. And it just is this constant pain throughout what feels like my entire body.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right.
I'm sorry.
Any memory problems?
A little bit, yes, Your Honor, a little bit. I'm having some memory problems, yes.
Okay. All right. Tell me, yesterday was Sunday, and tell me what you did yesterday. What was a typical Sunday be like for you?
Well, a typical Sunday, I typically get up, and most days are like this, Your Honor, but I typically get up around 8:30 in the morning. And then I'll get up and I'll use the restroom. I'll take my medication. Then I'll kind of lay down for another 10 to 15 minutes let things kick in. I'm really stiff and sore. I'll try to stretch out laying in bed. And that's usually like 10 to 15 minutes of stretching in bed though. And then just kind of as best as I can. And then I'll get up, and my wife and kids are usually up, and she'll have made coffee. And so I'll come out and get coffee and drink water. And then I'll sit down at the table and visit with my wife for 15 minutes or so, and then typically I'll go back and lay down for another half hour. And this last Sunday specifically, I laid down for a couple hours and watched a show. And then my kid crawled into bed, so I remember that show kind of lasting an hour and a half to 2 hours. It was a kid's show. And then I got back up, took my medications again. Had lunch. My wife had prepared some lunch for me because it was a Sunday. and then I went back and laid down. The medications does a number on my memory and I had caused me to be a little dizzy and a little sleepy, a little tired. It's those pain meds especially. And then I think I fell asleep for a few hours, and then got back up, and then I think I needed to stretch because anytime I lay down for more than an hour or so, I get really stiff, and then I need to really stretch out for 15 minutes just to even get things moving. And then I went out and had my wife had dinner, and then I had a glass of water, and my hands locked up so bad this last Sunday, I dropped it and broke the glass, shattered everywhere. My poor wife had to clean it all up. It was a mess. And then after dinner, I went to the recliner, watched some TV for another half hour. I text messaged a couple buddies just to say hello, and then came back, and then took my nighttime meds and fell asleep. And then that was my typical daytime. I struggle with sleep. I don't know if you want to know about that, but I do struggle.
So tell me, sleeping, it says in your activity report that you have difficulty sleeping. Have you had a sleep study?
No, I have not had a sleep study. I think the doctors are attributing it to the pain. And they're saying, I'm having these shooting pains at night that are waking me up. And so it's like a stabbing shooting pain in the middle of the night, just usually in my back. It'll jar me awake, and then I try to walk around and just try to walk, or stretch or do something. It'll keep me up, and it's horrible because it'll keep me up for like 30 minutes to an hour. And then I try to get back to sleep, and then I'll be able to sleep for another couple hours, and it just really messes with my my daytime ability to focus. It's probably it's all just a kind of a bad cycle.
Do you use alcohol or marijuana? Any street drugs?
No street drugs. Alcohol, I drank in the past, but with the medicine I'm taking, the doctors advise not to drink. I was never a heavy drinker, but I'd have a glass of wine or a couple beers with buddies. But with the narcotics, they say it can really do damage to your liver if you drink with it. So since I've been on the pain meds, I've stopped drinking. And marijuana, no, not since I stopped working.
Okay, I see your medications are listed at Exhibit 13E. I'm going to go through those real briefly with you. Metformin, are you still taking that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Glipizide, are you still taking that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, and hydrocodone, it looks like you're taking that still?
Yes.
Okay, and how many times a day do you need to take hydrocodone?
I take it as prescribed, but and never more. I think it's right now it's twice a day.
Okay. Gabapentin, are you still taking that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Does that help at all?
They all help a little bit, but yes, it helps.
And then looks like you're taking this medication for fibromyalgia, Lyrica.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, when did you start taking that?
Back when they diagnosed the fibromyalgia, which I don't remember the exact date. I'm
About
sorry.
a year and a half ago. Sound right?
Sure.
Okay. All right. Okay. Let me just ask you a real simple question. What if you had a job where you could sit down or stand up as you needed to, and shoes would come down conveyor belt, and all you had to do was take two shoes of the same size, put them in a box, and put the box to the side on another conveyor belt? Do you think you could do that kind of job?
Not for more than 15 minutes. I wouldn't be able to be there consistently and reliably, for a full-time shift. I wouldn't. So I could do it for 15 minutes, maybe 10 to 15 minutes. My hands would start to lock up, and my fingers, and then my back would be, starting to get in a lot of pain. And then I would just either need to lay down, or kind of walk around for 10 to 15 minutes, or but my hands would lock up would be the biggest thing, I think, on that. And then, And then might be able to go back for another 10 to 15 minutes. But then after that, I probably would be done.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Cahill, would you like to inquire?
Thank you very much, sir.
Mhm.
Mr. Evans, when Judge Hyatt was examining you, you told us about why you transitioned from construction work to Fred Meyer. Can you tell us why you switched from working as a cashier to working as a receptionist, please?
Yes, sir. Yes. Sorry. Yes, Mr. Cahill. It was sort of the same issue. Even the cashier job with the standing and lifting started to become really painful. And again, I've been working my whole life, so I didn't want to I just tried to look for a different job that might be more accommodating to what was going on with me physically at the time. And I saw the receptionist job up actually on a sign at kind of a local strip mall office, happened to be a lawyer's office. And then I just went in and applied, and he was a great person, and he gave me the job. And yeah, so it was less physically demanding.
Right. And you did find it less physically demanding?
Yes.
Okay. Now, can you tell us what kind of problems you were having working as a receptionist?
Well, it started with once that job started going, I was really starting to have problems with the pain, and then my hands. As a receptionist, you have to type, and the more I started typing, the more I started having problems with my hands. I was able to kind of sit, but my boss needed me to file files away and put things away, and so there'd be times where I'd still have to lift files and carry them around, and they started getting heavy. So, surprisingly, it's not a big bag of dog food, but even kind of the repetitiveness of that was becoming a problem. And then little things started popping up. I was having difficulty focusing on the job because of the pain. The messages were getting sloppier when clients would call in and I would take the message. Even being able to type that out for my boss, we're starting to become a little bit sloppier. So yeah. Okay.
Now, I want to circle back and focus on something that you mentioned. You said it was difficult for you to carry files. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Now, do you know how much you might typically lift in the job as a receptionist?
At my job, or just any?
At your job as a receptionist, how much did you typically lift?
Less than 10 pounds.
Okay. Now, were you having the same difficulties with, I'm going to backtrack a little. Did you have the same difficulties lifting at the Fred Meyer job as you did in construction?
Yes, it was painful. But the lighter items started feeling like carrying those big boards. Like, even lifting a gallon of milk was starting to feel like I was lifting those heavy 2x4s back in the day. So it was the same problems. It just, the ability to lift, the weight that I had to lift was triggering pain was becoming much less. Does that make sense?
Well, yes, it does. And I want to poke at that a little bit further, Mr. Evans. Thank you. Would you say that your main problem with lifting when you worked at the law office, did it have to do with your hands, your back, or some other part of your person?
If you would really need me to put it down to one thing, it was my hands, and then the second thing would be my back, and then the third part would be my shoulders. And then even with walking around, the numbness in my feet started to kicking in as well. So sort of in that order. So hands, yeah.
Okay. Now, you've told us about problems carrying 10 pounds of files and typing. Did you ever have any other problems with your hands because of the pain that you told us about in the job at the law office, your duties as a receptionist?
Once my hands lock up, they become almost unusable. So if I had to dial out on a telephone, luckily I had a headset. But if I had to dial out, like it started even becoming hard, like hitting the numbers correctly. There's an expectation that there was an expectation by my boss that we call out to clients as well. And so that became difficult.
Okay. You told us that you transitioned from full-time
sorry
to
to-
part-time.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I really need to stand. Would that be okay?
Go ahead and feel free to stand or sit as you need to, Mr. Evans.
Oh, thank you, Your Honor. Oh. Okay,
Okay.
And if you need a break, let us know.
I'm okay. I think I can keep going.
Now, the problem with your hand, since you left, you told us earlier that you transitioned from full-time to part-time at the law firm. Is that right?
Yes.
Would you tell us about your conversations with the owner of the firm about that transition, please?
Yeah, I mean, greatest boss ever. You know, and I went to him and I told him I was really struggling with physically with what was going on. And it was pretty obvious. I mean, my boss was a really smart guy and obviously could observe and see what was going on and could tell. And he basically said, "Hey, I'd like to just keep you on even part-time or whatever you can do," and kind of, and so it was really flexible. He asked me if there was anything he could do to help sort of accommodate me to do more hours. But it was really a discussion of like, hey, how desperate I was for health insurance just to go through this, because I was hoping to get better and come back full time. And I was like, I just need to see these doctors so we can figure it out. I'm still hopeful. I mean, if we get the back surgery and we can get all the medications dialed in, I'm not a doctor, but I'm hoping some of this stuff can get better.
I gather from that answer that you told us he was aware of these problems. Had you ever had any conversations with your boss or with coworkers about problems you were having before that transition conversation you just told us about? Complaints from clients, anything of that sort, please.
Yeah, so I was really struggling with the filing, and so coworkers would step in and help out with that. They would my boss would drop off a big box of files and ask me to put them all away, and I had the greatest coworkers, so they'd jump in and put some of the they'd put the files away for me. They could see I was really struggling with that. There was complaints made that the messages were becoming very almost, even though we're typing them out, like the way I worded them, or the wording wasn't very clear, wasn't precise like I used to. When I first started that job, I would almost be able to take exactly what the client would say, and it started becoming this like trying to summarize what they would say in like a few sentences. And so there were some complaints when we passed those messages off to the other staff that I wasn't taking accurate messages like I used to.
Okay, so now we've identified a couple of different areas where you were having problems. That is to say, physical and mental at the law office. Did coworkers around you ever express any concern, ask if you were okay?
Yes, I mean, all of them.
Okay, and can you tell what they were concerned about?
I mean, they asked if I was physically okay, or just asked if everything in my life was okay, and I just told them I was struggling with my health.
In the last few months that you worked at the law office, sir, how many days in a given week would you need help from coworkers to carry out your duties?
Every day.
Would you have to ask for help, or would people volunteer? Did they know you were in trouble?
People would volunteer on the files, and then people, it was almost as if they understood that I was going to make some mistakes and just did the best to work around it.
Understood. Okay, thank you. We're going to switch topics, sir. After you stopped working full time, well, let me ask you this. Did your primary care doctor diagnose you with diabetes, or did he refer you to a specialist?
I don't remember who actually gave the diagnosis.
Okay.
I've seen so many different doctors kind of along the way in the last couple of years. This is not who I'm only 47. This is not who I want to be.
Understood. Do you check your blood sugar at home, Mr. Evans?
I try to, yes, my wife does.
Okay. Can you tell us how often you do and generally what the score is?
I can tell you I check it a couple times a day. I don't remember the scores. I'll have to get you the diary. My wife keeps a diary. She's the one who's better in charge of that. So I'm happy to give that to you. I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you about the blood sugar diaries.
That's okay. Your Honor, okay if we file that?
Yes, I'll give you a week if you need it.
Okay, thank you very much, Your Honor. I'll report to the court if we want more.
Thank you.
We need more. Thank you, sir.
Mhm.
A lot of people, Mr. Evans, say that they can tell by the way they feel in their person when their blood sugar is out of line. Can you?
Yes.
I'd like you to tell the court about those problems, please.
Well, I either get super sleepy, really tired, or I feel like I'm gonna pass out, like I'm high. So it goes to those two levels.
Okay.
Usually it's the sleepy tired.
How many days in a given week do you feel fatigued or like you might pass out?
Due to the blood sugars?
Yes, please.
Maybe once a week.
Is there any other condition that causes you to feel that way, Mr. Evans?
Well, I take medications that cause me to feel fatigued. So
Okay.
I get really tired from the medications. I don't know. I mean, it takes me for a ride. I get really loopy. I just want to sleep.
Do you ever lie down during the daylight hours, Mr. Evans?
Yes.
How much of a typical day do you have to spend lying down?
In a typical day, meaning daylight,
Yeah, the daylight hours, please.
probably 40% of the day, maybe, or do you want me to give hours? I don't know how you want me to answer that.
I think that's a fine.
Yeah,
Yep.
Mr. Cahill, I think he pretty much answered that when we discussed his typical day routine. So I'll note that.
Thank you very much, Your Honor.
Mhm.
And I think you told the court that you drive 1 or 2 times a week. Is that right, Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Are there days you can't drive at all?
Oh, yes.
And is that because of medications or because of the diseases themselves?
It's both. It's both. The pain can get really bad.
If you know.
If you know.
Yeah, I think we're frozen
frozen.
here. Yeah, I think we froze here. I'm sorry. It's both. The pain can get really bad where I wouldn't even be able to grip the steering wheel, or sit and open the door, frankly, or hold my arms out because my shoulders will get really painful. So hold my arms out to steer the car, and then the medications. When I do drive, I have to time it like perfectly. There's this window where I'm not as tired, and so I try to and again, I'm driving not very far, and it's only if my wife can't help get me to where I need to go, and being home with 2 kids, so that's probably about once a week.
The function report you discussed with the judge says that your wife is the primary caregiver for your children in the house. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, I'm going to try and phrase this delicately, but it's a fairly direct question, sir. If Mrs. Evans works and you don't, why don't you take care of the kids?
Oh, I can't. Especially because I have a 3-year-old. The 7-year-old can self-manage a little bit, but the 3-year-old, he's pretty rambunctious. So he likes to, hang off walls and things, and he's super heavy. He's like 35 pounds. I can't lift him up anymore. And I just wouldn't be able to because of my back, my hands, the lifting, the chasing around. These kids have so much energy. And so it would be tough. I mean, they would just live on a screen, I guess. If my wife has because she's a podcaster, so she'll do a podcast and interview someone, and basically they're just in front of the TV, watching TV, which kind of zones them out for, because my 3-year-old is almost 4, so he's into the TV, and my 7-year-old loves screens, so it will just completely zone them out for a couple hours while she does that. If it was a full-time, if my wife was working a full-time job somewhere else, we'd have to get help.
I imagine it's difficult for someone who needs a stick to walk to keep up with a 3-year-old. So do you use a device to help you walk around the house as well?
I do, yes.
Okay. Now let me put something to you, Mr. Evans. You've told us that you need a stick to walk, but you've also told us about serious problems in your hands. Is that ever a problem for you? I mean, can you use a walker or a cane effectively all the time?
So the cane is used for short distances, like I can use my hands. It's not like but I just can't use them for very long. And so I'm not as mobile as I used to be. So I'll hold the cane, and then you're exactly right. My hands will go numb, but it's usually around the house, so I have to sit. If I leave the house, I have a walker, which it has I don't know if you've seen those, but my walker has a little a pad on it where you can just sit on it. And so if my hands get really, really bad, I don't have to hold the walker. I can just sit down on the walker itself.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've seen those, but
I
How
have.
much
Thank
more,
you.
Mr. Cahill? We do need to hear from the vocational expert as well.
Yes, Your Honor, just one more area to inquire. Mr. Evans, I'm looking at your function report and it indicates that you have trouble with, laces on your boots, washing your hair and so forth. Can you give us an idea about other daily tasks you have trouble carrying out because of your hands? I'm thinking about, you told us that you send text messages from time to time. Give us an idea about other problems you have with your hands, please.
sure. So text messaging is a great example. I can send a few text messages, and I can use my hands, but then after about, and I don't know, 5-15 minutes, depends on what's going on. But after about that type of range, my hands will lock up to a point where I can't use them. And then I need to let them rest or stretch them out, where I'm literally like pulling on my hands because they're locked up, pulling on my fingers, I'm sorry, because they're locked up. And I'll need to do that for 10 to 15 minutes. I can make myself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. But a lot of times I'll spread the peanut butter and then I'll have to sit and rest let my hands rest for 5 minutes and then come back and spread the jam. And then I'll have to sit and let my hands rest for 5 minutes and then come back and eat the sandwich. And I know it sounds crazy, but that's kind of where my hands are at.
Suppose, sir, you were healthy in every other part of your person. Suppose your head worked right. Suppose your back were fine. Suppose you could walk a couple miles if you wanted to, but you still had all the problems you have with your hands. Could you go back to work at the law office?
No,
What would keep that?
the
What would keep
hands,
you-
the
Okay.
hands. I mean, the hand pain, the locking up, I'd have to, the typing. I'm not sure of a job that you can't use your hands on.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Evans. That's my exam, Your Honor. Thank you for your patience, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Cahill. I appreciate your thoroughness. All right. So, Mr. Evans, we're going to hear from a vocational expert now. That is Isabella Baez, and she's already been sworn. Ms. Baez, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can, Your Honor.
Okay, so would you please, are your qualifications and experience accurately stated in the record?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Cahill, any objection to Ms. Baez as the vocational expert?
No, sir. I've had the pleasure to examine the witness. Her credentials are in order. We stipulate she's qualified.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Baez, are your qualifications and experience accurately stated at Exhibit 15E in the record?
Yes, they are.
Okay. And Mr. Cahill, any objection to Ms. Baez as a vocational expert?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Baez, have you had a chance to review the record and hear the testimony of Mr. Evans today?
Yes, I have.
Would you please describe for me Mr. Evans' past work going back to 2007?
Of course. So the first occupation is titled receptionist, and that's DOT code 237-367-038. And that's a sedentary job with an SVP of 4. And then Mr. Evans' second job can be classified as cashier 2, which is DOT code 211-462-010. And that is a light job at SVP 2. And then his last job can be classified as construction worker 2, which is DOT code 687026, and that is a very heavy job of SVP2.
All right. And it appears that the receptionist position was held for about 2 years. Would that meet the SVP on a SVP4? Hello?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. And then, of course, the other 2 jobs are SVP2, which requires a simple demonstration. Is that correct?
Yes, both cashier 2 and construction worker 2 are SVP2.
Okay. All right. I'm going to rule that past relevant work is that as a receptionist, cashier 2, and construction worker 2, consistent with the testimony of Ms. Baez. Ms. Baez, I'm going to give you a hypothetical question, and that would be a 47-year-old male with the same education and past work as Mr. Evans has. And this hypothetical person is limited to light work, which is standing or walking 6 out of 8 hours each, sitting 6 out of 8 hours, lifting 10 pounds frequently, 20 pounds occasionally. Could that hypothetical person perform any of Mr. Evans' past work?
Based on this hypothetical, that would eliminate the construction worker 2 occupation, but that individual could still perform cashier 2 and receptionist.
Okay, now if I added to hypothetical number 1 that the hypothetical person needed to sit or stand at will and were limited to simple repetitive tasks, could they perform any of Mr. Evans' past work?
This individual could probably perform construction worker, could not perform construction worker 2 or cashier 2, but there still could perform receptionist.
Okay. Now, if the hypothetical person in hypothetical number 1 additionally needed to use a cane for ambulatory assistance, would they be able to perform the position of receptionist?
No, Your Honor, they would not.
Okay. Now I'm going to give you a second. Well, actually, this would be the 4th hypothetical. This hypothetical person is limited to lifting 10 pounds at max, sitting 6 hours out of 8, standing or walking 2 hours out of 8 total, and limited to frequent grip and grasp. Could that hypothetical person perform any of Mr. Evans' past work?
No, Your Honor, none of his past work.
Okay. Now, would there be other jobs such a hypothetical person could perform that exist in significant numbers in the national or regional economy?
Yes, Your Honor. I've identified 3 occupations, the first of which is companion, which is DOT number 309677010, and that is at light duty with an SVP of 3. The second occupation is titled Assembler, Small Products 1, and the DOT for that is 706684022. And then the third occupation is parking lot attendant, and that is also light with an SVP of 2. The DOT code is 915473010.
Okay. Now, my next hypothetical, we're going to just call it a straight sedentary RFC, which would be lifting no more than 10 pounds, sitting or standing. Well, let's say sit 6 of 8 hours, stand or walk 2 of 8 combined, and occasional grip and grasp. Could that hypothetical person perform any of the jobs you described in response to my last question?
The individual could perform Mr. Evans' past work of receptionist. but none of the previous jobs that I just gave, including the companion assembler, small products, and parking lot attendant, because those are all at light duty.
All right. And has your testimony been consistent with the DOT?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. With respect to the sit or stand at will, is that response based upon your experience of 30 years as a vocational expert?
Yes, it's based on my experience, education, and training, and also information from the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Great. Thank you very much. Mr. Cahill, do you have questions of Ms. Baez?
I have three, Your Honor. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Ms. Baez. If we were to good afternoon, ma'am. If we were to take the court's first hypothetical, the light RFC, and add the restriction that that same person were limited to occasional use of the hands for gripping and grasping, does that change your answer?
Yes, that person would not be competitive in any type of work in any industry.
You can't identify any full-time jobs within that RFC?
No, sir.
If for medical reasons, a person's productivity at work were reduced by about 20% on an ongoing basis, can a person in that situation sustain full-time work in the U.S. economy?
No, they cannot. That would rule out any maintaining of competitive work.
Regardless of other limitations, if a person can expect for medical reasons to be absent from work the equivalent of 2 or 3 days a month on an ongoing basis, is that consistent with competitive work in the U.S. economy full-time?
No, it's not. In my experience, that would preclude competitive work in any industry.
Thank you very much. That's my examination, Judge Hyatt.
Thank you, Mr. Cahill. I appreciate your assistance today. Mr. Evans, I'm going to take your case under advisement, which means I'm going to think about it. I will issue a decision within the next 8 to 12 weeks. We're a little bit backed up right now. Do you have anything else that you'd like to say at this point?
No, Your Honor, just thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Baez, thank you for your testimony as well. The hearing will be
Yes,
closed.
thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you for hearing my case, Your Honor. Thank you, Mr. Evans.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much. That concludes the mock hearing sample for our hearing. Great job. And thanks to all three of you. And Isabella, great job for playing the role of a vocational expert with 30 years of experience.
Yeah, no problem.
I want to just do a quick Q&A for each of you, and I'll have questions. I think, Judge, I'd like to start with you. As a former Social Security judge, are there any tips that you would like to give to the clients on testimony and maybe what they've just observed here, or what tips you might give to your clients or our clients as we go into court with them in hearings?
Well, I think the first tip that I would give them is to be as spontaneous as possible. I've heard clients say, how come you don't tell me what the judge is going to ask me? How come you don't help me formulate an answer to, a question? Well, the reason is that judges like spontaneity in claimants. They don't like rehearsed testimony. So that's my first tip. My second one would be to avoid rambling on, to answer the question. You didn't ramble, Mr. Evans, you did well. In fact, I was prepared to grant an on the record decision, but
Thank you.
Honesty is really important, and spontaneity, and of course, not to ramble on and to try to just answer the exact question. Okay, that's my best 3 tips.
I love it. Mr. Cahill or Jack, do you have any tips that you might want to, same question for clients and prepping for their testimony?
Yeah, and I'll tell people this during prep. Your answers were really good in that they made clear that you can't do these things for medical reasons. A lot of people will say, I feel sore, I feel uncomfortable. I sit at my desk most days, and I might feel sore at the end of the day, and then I get up and do it again in the morning. You know, the answer is I can't do this. It hurts. I try to, but I have to stop. That's what the judge needs to hear in order to understand this. You know, the purpose of the testimony that we get from the claimants is not to give a detailed and sequential medical history. No one expects that. What we need to know is what all the medical records that we've already read about, how all these problems we've learned about by reading what doctors write down, what they look like in your daily life. That's the purpose. If a judge didn't need to talk to you, there'd be no hearing. He'd read the file and decide the case. So he really needs to hear what's going on in your daily activities. That's why you're in court.
Yeah, I think, and I want to add a little bit, and then I'm going to ask Isabella the same question if she has any tips. But one of the things I would say where, you know, is to be, and I instruct clients to use numbers and time when describing things instead of just saying, oh, my hands sometimes hurt or my hands often hurt. Instead, they, you know, I can use them for 10 to 15 minutes and then they go numb for 5 minutes. It really paints a more clear picture when you can offer some time frames. And I also tell clients it's okay to say I don't know or I don't remember, and that there's a file that kind of is behind them that both the judge has read and our attorneys have read to kind of help fill in some of those, you know, date questions, like, you know, and I get that a lot. Oh my God, I'm gonna have to remember when this was prescribed or when this doctor said what. And I say, no, you know, the reason you hired our firm is so the lawyers can come in and help out with those questions. And Dan, you did a great job of asking, like, when were you, you know, with diagnosed with diabetes or fibromyalgia or whatever it was. And then the only other thing I tell clients is, you know, and Dan, I do agree, like that natural, honest reaction, not rehearsed, is very important. But I do love that we can give our clients this sort of building block around where they can at least know, like, hey, look, a judge, someone's going to ask you, why can't you work? And you're so nervous the day of the hearing. Sometimes you might even forget the reasons you can't work. And Dan, you played the role of a very sweet, kind judge. But there are some judges that get very upset if the lawyer leads too much. Like, and the difference would be a leading question versus an open question. An open question would be, why can't you work? Where a leading question is, oh, I read you can't lead because you have degenerative disc disease, fibromyalgia, you know, memory and concentration problems, and diabetes. And that's a leading question. And some judges don't appreciate when lawyers do that and will interrupt the hearing to let the lawyer know about that in a stern way. And so when a judge does ask a more open-ended questions, I think, you know, if you can just kind of keep in your mind, or, you know, even, you know, I don't work it out with your lawyer, how to answer that sort of question. Why can't I work? Just so you have something to grab onto. And that's probably the biggest question that I think a lot of folks struggle with. Isabella, is there any advice that you would give to clients as far as that we haven't covered here? And no pressure, it's not like you have to, Isabella.
Sure. So I would just go off a little bit of what you were saying about, you know, if the client tends to choke up or gets anxious about anything. I like to tell people a lot, you know, like, especially if you have anxiety or depression kind of present in your record or anything like that, if you do kind of have a hard time at the hearing, all that does is kind of make you look more credible in that, you know, you're just being truthful, you're being yourself at the hearing, and that I would just trust your attorney and the judge, you know, to kind of keep things going, and that it'll be okay if you do choke up and kind of forget things. And like, you know, Mr. Evans and everyone else here has said before, you can always say, I don't remember, I don't know, if you're kind of not knowing what else to do.
Mhm.
I know we've been going a long time and I want to honor your guys' time. I do have at least one more question, maybe two, if you don't mind. And what advice would you give our clients regarding when the vocational expert testifies? And, you know, Judge, you gave a great example, different hypotheticals, one where the vocational expert said, yeah, he can go back. This hypothetical person can go back to work and can do these certain jobs of, you know, that Isabella listed in those hypotheticals. And what advice would you give as a client who's listening to that testimony and in the simplest way of trying to understand what's going on?
I think it's important that our clients recognize that the judge is not bound by anything that the vocational expert says. It's just information, and it's part of the process. The judge needs to go through these questions to narrow it down. And if the claimant shows a reaction like, I can't do that kind of work, or what is she, crazy? It's not gonna go well. It's much better just to let the process play out and not take it personally or react. Yeah.
Thank you, Jack.
We all get this question all the time, especially after the hearing where the client says, I can't do that. The way I explain it is I say, just like lawyers, doctors know that every set of evidence supports more than one conclusion. And so the judge will look through this and try and derive all these questions are lists of limitations that the judge or your lawyer have derived from trying to read the medical records in your testimony. And then they say, suppose I agree with this doctor, then I ask this question. If I think that doctor got it right, I ask that question. Suppose one question is accurate for 2019, but not for 2020, because your condition changed or got worse or got better or whatever it might be. So they're describing a half a dozen or more hypothetical people, but they're only going to pick one, and we don't know which one it is. So try not to worry about it, because the one that you're getting angry about is probably not the one that's going to end up in the decision.
Thank you. One of the things I tell clients is that I'll say, look, the judge is going to give 5 or 6, maybe, or 2 or 3 hypothetical questions about a hypothetical person. And in that, he's basically giving himself him or herself, the judge is giving him or herself a different options on what they may or may want to do with the decision, because they haven't made it, they technically don't make a decision that day. Just like as you pointed out at the end of the hearing, you're going to review the records and kind of take everything into consideration and then go make a decision and then issue a written decision. And so ultimately the judge will pick one hypothetical which he believes is related to that person. It's not like it's all 6. And if it's one hypothetical where you cannot work, then we win. And if it's one where the judge believes you could do light duty work, then unfortunately in this particular scenario, we would not win. But it comes down to just giving options for the judge. And in most hearings that I've been in, which, has been a few, it narrows down from, they usually start at this kind of very strong, physically strong, mentally strong person. And then the judge will sort of come back down and walk their way to more limiting type of hypotheticals. And so that's in my experience. One thing I want to ask you to, just because we did a lot of this in the mock hearing, which I don't think happens in real hearings, is that it does from time to time, but not as much as, I personally don't find it common in hearings, is we referred a lot to the adult function report. I don't find judges referring a lot to the adult function report. Instead, they refer to a medical records primarily. And I have another video that we created for our clients on how to fill out the adult function report. And in that, it is my opinion and that the adult function report does not make a case, but can be used to break a case. Now, I know there's other lawyers who might have different opinions that the adult function report can really make a case. My opinion is it's medical records and medical treatment that make a case, not the adult function report. However, I have seen the adult function report brought up in hearings, but technically on a small percentage. What is your experience? Just because I don't want clients to watch this and be like, oh my God, my adult function report, how did I fill that out? But that was the only record because we had a pretend medical history here. And so can you guys address the use of the adult function report just because we used it so heavily here?
It's a self-report, and that is obviously much less reliable than a third-party report, which would be a medical opinion or what a person says to their doctor. A person is presumed to be honest when they talk to their doctor because they want to be treated correctly. And the adult function report is just a self-report. And, you know, I think in my 19 years on the bench, I don't think I ever looked at an adult function report, because I could get the testimony. I could get the same thing by asking the claimant the question in court, and I could judge their demeanor. So that's my feeling about it. I don't know, Jack, what do you think?
I agree 100%. I mean, I've been doing this a while, and I can think of one judge who would always ask a question about adult function reports, and no judges who ever asked about adult function reports. The medical evidence, these cases live and die on the medical evidence. And if you're going to testify, whether it's in writing or in person, about something that's not consistent with the medical records, you might as well not come. That is to say, medical evidence is the fuel that makes this motor run.
Yeah, I agree.
Isabella, do you have anything else to add about the adult function report? Or?
I think Jack and Dan covered it.
Perfect. Is there, and this is the last question, is there anything that you would like to tell our clients who are watching this video, any other tips or advice that you might want to give them? You know, and we do a big pre-hearing conference where we talk about how to dress and, you know, how to kind of do those. I have, you know, that video available for clients as well, but anything, and they always hear from me. So, you know, to hear from the two of you, I think is gold. So is there anything else you might want to tell them as far as tips to prep for their hearing?
I think the only thing I'd say is that it's a stressful experience for everyone. Every person who ever appeared in front of me was enduring a very stressful experience, very anxiety producing, and they probably, most of them probably didn't sleep the night before. But, you know, it's a process, and it's a step that is necessary to go through to get from point A to point B. And it always, you know, it always works out. So I'm sorry for people to tell them that they're going to be anxious, but that's just part of the process.
Yeah, that's right, is that if you weren't anxious about appearing in court, and I have this conversation when I prep clients individually, if you weren't anxious about appearing in court, we'd be worried. What does that mean? Does it mean you don't appreciate the seriousness of the case? Does it mean that you have plenty of experience testifying in court? Because I'll need to know about that. Mm-hmm. But you know, that's a situation where you got to kind of turn it over to your lawyer. That is to say, you've never done this before, and we've done this thousands of times. And so please follow our lead. We mostly know what we're doing. Mm-hmm. But there's a flip side to that coin. That is to say, everybody, I mean, there's better ways to make money with a law degree. We're doing this because we want to help you. We're doing this because this is important to us. And we know that we've got a couple hundred cases, but we also know that you only have one. And that's what's first in our mind the whole time.
Good point.
Thank you.
Isabella?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's important for our clients in general and everyone in general going through the Social Security hearing process that, you know, disability is a different kind of definition for Social Security than what you would think. And we 100% believe that, you know, in your disabilities and that you're disabled, but it's a totally different question in the Social Security process, and it directly relates to if you can work and whether you can sustain employment. So I think it's just important to keep that in mind, that we do believe in your disabilities, but it's just a totally different ball game in Social Security.
Yeah, I would agree with everything you guys just said. You know, as far as it being pretty natural to be nervous and anxious walking into a hearing room, whether it be by video or phone. I think phone hearings have been tremendous. I want to give a couple quick tips just from this hearing. I purposely wore a sort of golf collared shirt. Talk to your individual lawyer who's going to be representing you at your hearing. They may, especially if you're appearing in video or in person, request that you maybe put on a nicer collared shirt. I just personally believe that you want to dress up and be respectful. However, I understand that because you might not be working and likely you're not working, I'm not asking clients to go out and buy a brand new suit for their court appearance. What I'm asking is just to put on the nicest thing you have, to be respectful to the moment, respectful to the judge. And in this case, I was, I was playing a role, and due to my economic situation, I felt like this would be the nicest shirt that I had to be respectful. There's some lawyers that will say dress down and come in a t-shirt, and I just, in my experience of doing thousands of hearings, and Dan, I see him shaking his head, you should dress up for the occasion. It's showing respect to the judge, and that's important. The other thing too is that just, and I want to touch on this a little bit, is that this is a typical type of hearing. Every hearing is a little different though. So you can't just watch this one mock hearing and think this is exactly how my hearing is going to go. There's some judges that let the lawyer question first, and then the judge will follow up. There's some times where the judge cuts the lawyer off on certain topics and will jump in and ask you questions while the lawyer is asking you questions. So it's more of a peppercorn or a popcorn type of event in questioning. But generally speaking, this is, and I'm going to make up a number here, but I would say 75% of the hearings or 70% of the hearings sort of go like this, but every judge has their own style. There's some judges that will let the lawyer give an opening statement or ask the lawyer to give an opening statement, and there's some judges that won't. There'll be some judges that will make sure that your opening statement is no longer than 15 seconds long. And some judges that will let your lawyer talk for 15 minutes. But we've been in so many hearings, there is a standard theme to the Social Security disability hearing that we tried to present here today for your benefit. And again, this is a sample hearing. And anytime I hand out sample questions, people are like, oh, they never asked me that in the hearing. And again, we're just trying to get your mind to start thinking and preparing for your hearing. And our job is to put you in the best position possible to win. And that's what we're trying to do. And like Judge Hyatt said, it can be extremely nerve-wracking. But if you look at the statistics within the Social Security disability process, your best chances of winning statistically are actually at the hearing. And most of our cases within the firm, we have our highest success rate of winning your case at the hearing. Does that mean we win every case? No, it does not. But we have appeals processes even after the hearing. So if you lose, we can appeal to the appeals council. And our firm, we take cases to the United States District Court as well and up into federal court. So, that being said, and I always tell people, take a little pressure off yourself. A, you're well represented. B, your medical records carry a ton of weight. So the things you're not seeing behind the scenes is actually carrying a lot of weight in the decision-making process. I always not joke around, but I always kind of tell folks, look, and Dan, this is probably the last question I have for you, but in my experience, and this is a bit of a guess, 90% of the judge's decision is based off the medical records, and 10% is based off of anything you're hearing at the hearing or hearing from a filled out form. And that's being generous to the client and their testimony. Because I think, like you said, based off my testimony, you're ready to pay me on the record right there, Johnny, on the spot. But if there's no medical records to support anything of how I testified, it doesn't matter if I testified perfectly, because the medical.
Well, except in your case, when you couldn't lift a dog of bag food anymore, I knew you were disabled.
Okay. He's joking, but you have to have medical treatment. You have to have medical records.
You're right.
That's a huge part of what's going on. So dear clients, take the pressure off yourself. You want to do well, you want to prepare, but just know you have medical records, and we have been working hard to try to get that evidence in the file from your doctors and getting all your medical records for a complete file.